Welcome to the State Transportation Board. We're going to start with the invocation that I will give, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and that will be followed by a roll call vote. So if you would, let's all stand for the invocation. We come today and ask for your mercy for this nation and this world as we suffer through this horrible, unprecedented times fighting the COVID disease. We also ask for your wisdom and guidance of this board and commissioner and his executive staff and every member of this department. We ask for your wisdom and your guidance and that you keep us all safe. Amen. With that, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right. For those calling in, we're fixing to do the roll call, starting with number one, but also remember the two, after you do the roll call, put your phone on mute where we will not have all the interference. With that, Kristen's going to do the roll call.
Okay, District 1, Ann Purcell.
Here.
2, Johnny Floyd.
Here.
3, Lynn Westmoreland.
Here.
4, Robert Brown. 5, Stacy Key. 6, Kevin Abel. 7, Rudy Bowen.
Here.
8, Tim Golden.
Here.
9, Emily Dunn.
Here.
10, Jamie Boswell.
Here.
11, Jeff Lewis.
Here.
12, Don Grantham.
Here.
13, Dana Lemon. And 14, Jerry Sharon.
Here.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Looks like we are almost unanimous. Again, a complete group. We're missing one or two, but with that, let me welcome you to the July meeting of the State Transportation Board. Once again, with social distancing for those who can't see anybody in the audience, and everybody has on masks. Mine's off is obviously for me to be able to speak more clearly. But I welcome you to the meeting, and we'll jump into it. We may have a little longer meeting than normal. We have a lot of business to go over, not having the committee meetings on Wednesday, and as we all try to adapt to the new normal during this time. But with that, I ask that, I assume everybody read the minutes from the last meeting. I would ask for a motion and a second for approval of those minutes. Have a motion, have a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed likewise. I'm learning to try to wait and delay for all the delayed phone calls, but I think it was unanimous and the minutes have been approved. We're going to jump into it, and I know I've already spoke to Albert Shelby. If you would, Albert, would you come up and present the August letting, and then we'll follow that with hopefully for a vote of approval. Albert, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. So good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, and members of the board. I'm here to present the projects the department is proposing to advertise for the August 2020 letting. Before we present August, here are the final FY 2020 results. We have let a total of 330 projects in FY 2020. This chart shows the number of projects by improvement type. The value of these 330 projects is approximately $3.349 billion through the June 2020 bid awards, with 299 GDOT let projects worth approximately $1.18 billion and 31 local let projects worth $169 million. This chart shows the dollar amount distribution by improvement type, with maintenance, bridge, and road projects making up the bulk of the improvement types. Here are the results of the June 2020 letting. Of the 21 GDOT let contracts presented to the board, all were awarded. Now I'm going to discuss the projects in the August 2020 letting. We have a total of 44 projects, and all are GDOT let. The next 4 slides list the 42 non-TIA projects on page 10. As you can see with this slide, we are letting a variety of projects throughout the state to address capacity, maintenance, and safety issues. The August 2020 letting is a safety-focused letting. 60% of the projects in this month's letting are safety-focused, including improvements such as installation of center and edge line rumble strips, cable barriers, roadway signage, and a roadway crossing marking. These projects are a great example of our continued commitment to improve the safety of the traveling public. The next project will rehab the concrete on I-16 from State Route 67 in Bullock County to just west of I-95 in Chatham County for a distance of 30 miles. This section was last repaved in 2002, 18 years ago. The next project will resurface State Route 113 from Billings Villa Rosa Road in Carroll County to State Route 120 in Haralson County for a distance of 9.6 miles. This section was last repaved in 2004, 16 years ago. This next project will resurface I-285 from Clifton Springs Road to State Route 42 for a distance of 3.1 miles. This section was last repaved in 2002, 18 years ago. This project is the replacement of the structurally deficient bridge on State Route 16 over Rocky Comfort Creek. The existing bridge was constructed in 1937, 83 years ago. 83. And this is a ground view of that bridge to be replaced.
All right.
This next project is located at the intersection of State Route 211 and Old Hog Mountain Road in Barrow County. The proposed project will replace the existing unsignalized intersection with a one-lane roundabout. This project will reduce crash frequency and severity while improving operational efficiency at the intersection and is another example of our focus on safety. The final highlighted project is the replacement of the structurally deficient bridge on State Route 29 over Pewes Creek. The existing bridge was constructed in 1939, 81 years ago. And here's that ground view of that bridge to be replaced. Next, we will go over the projects that we'll present that TIA is letting in the August 2020 letting. So the August 2020 letting consists of one TIA project, one project in the southern Georgia region. River Valley TIA project consists of 7.73 miles of 4-lane widening on US 280 in Crisp County from Lake Blackshear to State Route 300 connector just west of Cordele. A total TIA investment of $32.9 million. We also want to point out that this segment of State Route 30 US 280 is part of the Governor's Road Improvement Program. This Southern Georgia TIA project will mill, level, and resurface 1.82 miles of 2nd Street in Tifton between US 82 and Virginia Avenue. That total TIA investment is just over $1 million. So we have 44 projects proposed for the August 2020 letting. This chart shows the distribution by improvement type. The estimate of these projects in the August 2020 letting is approximately $119 million. This chart shows the dollar amount distribution by improvement type. So in conclusion, we are proposing to advertise 44 projects, which represent 44 GDOT contracts. Mr. Chair and members of the board, I present this for your consideration for approval.
Do I have any,
Tim,
yes,
Tim, this is Lynn. I have a question for Albert.
go ahead. I was fixing to ask for questions, Lynn. Go ahead.
Albert, on these rumble strips, I hope there'll be some review of those, especially when they're put in close to residential areas. We are having some complaints about the noise that's caused from them, and I didn't know if this was something that was statewide or just in this one particular case, but it is causing some problems for people where they're put, and I think it just needs to be looked at, because this is something that they're very loud, and if you're trying to sleep, it's pretty worrisome.
Okay. Do you have an example of location or anything? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Albert, we
I will.
The Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Lynn, for the comment. The districts use a data-driven approach, looking at crashes, run off the roads, and use that, but they also do contemplate the residential areas as well. Obviously, even one home may be affected, but the flip side of that conversation is if they are hearing them, then they're working to try to improve safety. But yes, that is taken into consideration. Not always can we accommodate that. Obviously, if their people are hearing them, then they're working. But we sort of understand that, and the districts, as they look at that and to develop these projects, they try to take that into consideration.
well,
Number one, we're still seeing the highest crash frequency and fatalities are run off the roads or lane departure. So that's the emphasis of implementing these safety improvements.
Well, I know some of them in this one particular case, and I talked to Michael, and we're working on it to try to solve the problem. But this has to do with the left turn lane, where people are getting in that left turn lane way too early. And so we're working on it. I just think before we go across the state and start putting in these rumble strips everywhere, that there needs to be some consideration, because I understand it's a safety, and I understand if one home is involved, the noise means that it's working, but it also means that somebody's not getting any sleep.
We all value sleep, I assure you. Thank you.
Any other questions? I can tell you, Lynn, from staying in the hotel last night, I value sleep too. But any questions from any member of the board that's on the phone or in present? If not, do I have a motion for approval? So moved. How about a second?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed likewise? Hearing none, the letting has been approved. Thank you, Albert. Appreciate it. Next up, we will have the Commissioner's report from Russell McMurray.
Good morning, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. It's a
Good morning.
pleasure to be before you today. Before I jump into my regular report, I'd just like to mention what an important day yesterday was for transportation and infrastructure projects, not only for Georgia, but for the nation. As you know, the President visited Atlanta yesterday and made a major announcement regarding streamlining of the NEPA process. In fact, the Council of Environmental Quality announced its final rule to comprehensively update and modernize the National Environmental Policy Act regulations for the first time in over 40 years. And let me just give you a few highlights of what that really means. It improves the management of the overall NEPA process by establishing presumptive time limits for up to 2 years for preparation of environmental impact statements, which is the highest level of environmental analysis, in 1 year for something called the environmental assessment, which is a project that's of a lesser environmental impact. Also, the rule has presumptive page limits for the EISs or the environmental assessments, and also requires joint schedules for a single EIS that gets ultimately to something called a record of decision. So that's very, very nice to have sort of a shot clock, if you will, and also page limits. We all remember page limits from our days in schools, right? Sometimes we stretch to get that, but in the environmental process, this won't be a stretch to get to the page limit. This will be a reduction in page limits, so that's very welcome. It also strengthens the role of the lead agency. So for our case, that would be Federal Highway. Often there's other federal agencies that have to do the environmental analysis, and it was never quite certain who took sort of the lead, if you will. So for transportation infrastructure, that's Federal Highway USDOT, and so we're glad that they will be able, that clarifies that. The other thing I'll highlight is it really codifies relevant case law and provides some new efficiencies, and let me explain what that means. It includes new provisions to assist federal agencies in determining where the NEPA applies or the appropriate level of environmental review. And I'll give you this example. It clarifies the definition of a major federal action, and that's a term, major federal action, and excludes activities with minimal federal funding. So this is the old adage, if there was one federal penny in the project, it became a federal project. You all have heard that. I assure you all the board members heard that. Oh, this is a federal process because we spent federal dollars on it. So it really provides some clarity around that, so we look forward to that. It directs agencies to analyze a reasonable range of technical and economically feasible alternatives. That's one of the things you do in upfronting your environmental work. You look for alternatives. As you know, we go out to public meetings and sometimes we'll show multiple alternatives of projects. And this, very importantly, talks about economically feasible alternatives. I can assure you, we've shown alternatives that we could have never afford to build. And that's not being genuine to the public. So I think, again, a really big improvement there. It also allows agencies to establish procedures to use other agencies' categorical exclusions, and those are federal agencies. So when we do a project with a federal highway document for a categorical exclusion document, and if we engage with the Corps of Engineers, the Corps has to go do their own separate categorical exclusion for the same project. So this would allow federal agencies to share the same environmental document and process with each other. And that really clarifies that. It also expands public involvement and improves coordination, which is very important. It sort of reduces the duplications, again, of documents and coordination that may come between different federal agencies and their different requirements. So again, we've seen public involvement be so critical to projects, and this only enhances that and gives some more opportunities to do that. And finally, it ensures meaningful and effective environmental reviews. It clarifies that mitigation must have a nexus to the effects. And I can tell you war stories about where we do mitigation work that we're trying to figure out why is that even being mitigated. So it really ties the two together for the impact to the mitigation. And probably most importantly, to underscore out of all of this and out of the announcement yesterday, it does not alter any substantive environmental law or regulation. Again, in the balance of power, laws are laws. So the environmental laws that exist still stand. So this is really process improvement, procedural improvement that really speeds up the things. Again, time limits, page limits, again, all protecting the environment. So yesterday was a very big day for transportation and infrastructure projects for the nation. I was also honored that the president invited me up to the stage to say a few words. That was quite an honor. And I'm sure that we will share more details with you about these reforms that we've put in place as we get further and deeper into many positive changes. So again, a very great day for infrastructure. So with that, let me move into our traditional commissioner's report, starting with our state fund collections for June 2020. Our collections totaled $148.9 million. That would be $139.9 in excise and $9 million in fees. So fiscal year to date, which is the entire fiscal year 20, totaled $2.04 billion. The excise was $1.87 billion, $167.67 million in fees. Later in Angela Whitworth's presentation on budget, she's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive in what the collections look like for FY20. So she'll give you some more information there. Our total employment figure for ending June 30 was 3,812 full-time employees, 72 temporary maintenance staff. We hired 13 employees, promoted 21 employees, and separated 43 employees. Let me move into our procurement report, and again, as we report on June, we get the fiscal year-to-date totals. But in June of 2020, the procurement team advanced 154 contracts valued at $35.3 million for engineering, design, right-of-way, or geotechnical professional services. That brings our FY20 year-to-date totals to 1,588 contracts executed, valued at $563 million. So again, all the professional services work it takes to advance projects to lettings. A few things to note: this was a record year out of the last 6 years for procurement volume. Also, the dollar amount set a new record at that $563 million, and it beats last year's record by $78 million. So again, this is the pipeline of work that gets projects out, so very important. And one thing I'd like to highlight, and I'm very proud of our procurement team and all the members it takes to deliver or get projects through the procurement process, was our fourth quarter was our highest volume. So despite being teleworking and pandemic, they did the most volume of work out of the entire year, out of a record year, while teleworking and working differently. So congratulations to our procurement team for what they do. Let me move into highlights of, just again, in view of time, a couple of projects open to traffic. One was in Lee County, which is Congressional District 2, a little over 4 miles of milling and resurfacing and shoulder rehabilitation on State Route 3. The contractor was Reeves Construction Company. Finished up in June 17th. Total investment right at $1.9 million. Completed on time and under budget. The next project I'd highlight is really a major freight corridor investment along State Route 17, US 78, for 7 miles of widening, reconstruction of that roadway beginning at State Route 43 and extending up to South Mill Road. That's just there north of Thompson, south of Washington. Included 4 new bridges across 2 creeks, which are part of the lake. The contractor was Reeves Construction Company. Opened to traffic on June 19th. Represents a $28.8 million investment along that freight corridor. Project was completed ahead of schedule and under budget. Now I'd like to move into some updates and some highlights and recognition for our staff, starting with Miss Kimberly Servor, a GDOT Employees Relations Specialist, for her recognition by the Georgia Department of Administrative Services for her contribution to the 2019-2020 Giving is Easy and Impactful campaign. The annual DOS campaign is part of the state charitable contributions program and is driven by coordinators' willingness to engage with employees, inspire, participate, and manage tactical responsibilities. The impact of Kimberly's leadership was evident by the high participation during last October's Charity Fest, an event where participating charities showcase their causes to GDOT employees here and secure annual contributions through the giving portal. So I want to congratulate Kimberly and for her recognition, not only by DOS, but our recognition for her work again to Georgia DOTs to put their best foot forward in charitable giving. So congratulations to Kimberly. I really appreciate her work. Now let me highlight another sort of statewide project of interest. This is one down in Bainbridge with State Route US 84 at US 84 Business, which is also State Route 38. This is down in GDOT District 4. This used to be a very busy intersection that was somewhat on the right, you can see, that was a lot different than what we came up with. As you can see, there's a lot of freight traffic. There's a fuel distribution center right there that lined up with an intersection that did not function very well. This allows traffic to just seamlessly flow around US 84 and around Bainbridge. So this was a $4.4 million investment. Oxford Construction Company was the contractor, and then just a great project that keeps traffic flowing much better than what was previously experienced there. Let me move back into a few internal items. As you recall, earlier this year, we provided a presentation on our online employee resource portal we call Experience You. Now about 6 months old, I'm extremely proud to showcase the success and the high usage of the GDOT team. So since March, as you know, we've had about 1,500, almost 1,600 employees that transitioned to teleworking. So we've seen a substantial increase in the use of Experience U across the agency. Microsoft Teams is sort of our platform and the most used tool, followed right behind the forum on Experience U, the employee forum, and then the interactive org chart follows that. And then lastly, sort of the use of acronyms. We really like our abbreviations for everything. So this is hard to see, but the scale tells you everything. These charts basically show you usage. Microsoft Teams certainly has remained consistent over the past few months. But let me give you some stats. There have been 85,000 team chat messages. We've had 979,000 private chat messages, more than 23,000 calls made, and this one really sort of gets me, is we've had 21,000 meetings using Teams. Do we meet a lot or what? Wow. This might be one we want to see go the other way, but when you're virtual, this is the way you communicate. So I would actually expect that number to go up because communication is key. We know that. And we're glad that we have these platforms in place that we can leverage and continue our operations at a high level while we're virtual. Experience U couldn't have been launched at a better time, in my opinion. It's certainly been essential. And again, I want to go back and just acknowledge our GDOT team members that created this idea, our IT team who basically made it work and made a concept a reality. And I'm very proud of our staff for being able to pull this off. So just wanted to share those great news with you. And also, while we're talking about technology and customer service, let me transition to our external customer service and something that we do on our online communications effort. It's basically the Contact Us link on our webpage. We actually call it Remedy inside the department. And Remedy is a tool that helps us respond directly back to people that contact the department. And we get, believe me, lots of inquiries from multiple people. And when we get those inquiries, they have to be routed to the right person to get an answer. So I'm proud to announce that our 2020 fourth quarter, we met our performance goals of 87% of our inquiries were addressed or resolved within a 72-hour period. And that's very substantial. One of the things I'll share with you, though, is if you go there and click on the Contact Us, you will get a reply back that we have received your inquiry and that we will get back to you with some response in 72 hours. And again, it's a substantial response. You know, we want to be able to answer the question. So that's been great. We've continued to work on this. We've done more training across our districts, again, because when you get contacted, usually by email to some subject matter expert, it's critical that they provide the answer back to that citizen that gets back to them through this portal. So again, we've hit a record on our goals and our targets of trying to get back within 72 hours. And I might note again, all this while COVID-19 is going on. So great job by our staff. And lastly, I just want to highlight another project. This is a very important one. The Interstate I-85 Phase 1 project, which was one of our, the actual first MMIP project to break ground back in July 2018, so nearly 2 years ago. And you're going to hear a little bit more about MMIP updates today from Matthew Fowler. But just wanted to highlight this one because it's open. And first one to go to construction, the first one to be open to traffic. In fact, it opened 41 days ahead of schedule. The project was a design-build project led by C.W. Matthews, which added 10.5 miles of general-purpose lanes along 85 in both directions, from Hamilton Mill Road in Gwinnett County up to State Route 53 in Jackson County. That's the Brazelton area. And as you know that area, there's tremendous amount of freight distribution centers in that corridor. So this is a huge investment in our freight flow for Georgia, but as well improves the motorist commutes that happen along this area. We expect to see a 56% reduction in delay by the year 2030. Again, it represents a $135 million investment, capital investment along this corridor. So usually a project of this magnitude would have some kind of event or ceremony or ribbon cutting, if you will. But in today's condition, I'm proud to announce that our strategic communications team came up with a virtual ribbon cutting, and that will be posted later today on the web. And I want to thank the many board members. It actually, project goes through Congressional District 7, 9, and 10. And also the chairman gave words for this virtual ribbon cutting. So you'll see a video later commemorating this important milestone, first MMIP project under construction, the first one finished. So stay tuned for that. Mr. Chairman, that sort of concludes my report, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions or comments. But I do have one more item after that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll get to that once we get through questions. Any questions for the commissioner or comments? I'll lead off and just say, very proud. I look forward to Matthew's presentation on the MMIP program. That's so exciting. And I can tell you, I know I-85, and I know Rudy's real pleased, and Emily and other board members from that area. But Jamie, I guess, I'm missing somebody that represents that on the board. But it's also, I know it personally from driving it a lot, and it's so much needed. And it just highlights how exciting all the other projects in the MMIP, how important they are, and how exciting it is for the future for Georgia and our transportation. What a great improvement. So with that, any other questions? Any members of the board that's present or on the phone have any questions of Commissioner McMurray before we go forward? If not, Commissioner, you will move on to the next item, please.
Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Janine Miller to you as our planning director. On June 26th, the House and the Senate unanimously confirmed the governor's appointee, Ms. Janine Miller, to serve as our planning director. I think many of you know Janine and have had the opportunity to meet with her, and she's going to come up in a minute. But I just, again, give you a little bit of background. Previously, a senior advisor to USDOT Secretary Elaine Chao, also a senior advisor for rural infrastructure at the U.S. For the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Mr. Sonny Perdue. I was able to see him yesterday. It was great to catch up with him. She also was the director of the Georgia Center of Innovation and Logistics, so she's got a strong logistics background and understands freight flows here in Georgia well. And prior to that, where I first engaged with Janine was when she was the executive director of the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. So I keep saying we go back a long way, but it makes us both sound old, and she's very young. And so I don't mean to imply anything. So it's really great to have her here. She certainly brings a wealth of knowledge and experience and professionalism to this department, and we're just excited to have her on the team. And Janine, I'd like to welcome you up for a few comments to the board.
Now, can everyone hear me on the line?
I don't know if it's on or not. Can everybody on the phone?
Yes.
I can hear.
Okay, great.
Go
Good
ahead.
morning, everyone, and thank you so much for welcoming me here, Commissioner and Board. I'm so excited to work with you and for you here. And the first thanks, of course, go to Governor Kemp for appointing me to do this very, very important work for the state. I believe that planning is very similar to prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that is what drives my passion for planning. But I certainly have a passion for transportation, and I know that the governor is very excited to get started in this new partnership and this new work here. Also, of course, have to thank the transportation committees at the House and the Senate for making time on sine die in an historically hectic season, a historically hectic session, to confirm me so that we can get started on our work here together. So I also need to thank the Commissioner and all of your staff and the Planning Division for keeping the ball rolling, for keeping the good work going in the interim since former Director of Planning Jay Roberts departed, and really pulling double, triple load, and then you layer on top of that the COVID work, excellent COVID work you all have done. So thank you for that. So I'm here to help carry the load and be part of the team and bring my best forward. Commissioner mentioned a little bit about some of my background, and I've had the chance to work with almost all of you in the past, and I'm really excited to be here today and in future committee meetings and board meetings. But I want to tell you that my first thinking about getting into public service occurred on the platform of the MARTA station at Georgia State Station. And I looked behind me and I saw the Capitol and I said, that's where I want to go. That's the work I want to do because I want to make a difference here. State government has been the primary theme through my service, even though I have worked in private sector and federal government. I love state government. We really make such a huge difference here in the work that we do on behalf of our citizens, our businesses, and making the transportation system as efficient and safe for all of even the Southeast in the country. I've had the opportunity to work and be a part of really big transportation initiatives, things that I have been very passionate about in my life, including the I-85 express lanes. That was truly a tremendous endeavor that I believe has spawned the confidence and the ability to go forward with the MMIP. And that is something, one of my prior roles, as the Commissioner mentioned, at the Center of Innovation for Logistics at the Department of Economic Development, as we were speaking with potential companies who wanted to move to Georgia. One of the things that we highlighted are that we're adding infrastructure capacity to new lanes to all of our congested highways that in the future, because of tolling, will not be congested. And it is absolutely a stellar initiative that has had a couple of installments already underway, and there are obviously far more planned, and I'm just so excited to be a part of that in its implementation. Of course, TIA, which has been tremendous for rural Georgia, and the freight plan that is coming up, and working with the General Assembly on the Freight Commission work is going to be a really exciting thing to be proceeding and moving forward for our state. But really, when it all comes down to, for me, is advancing rural prosperity, improving small business growth, and economic development statewide. That is what transportation investments are in their most meaningful and most return on investment. It comes in those spaces, and I'm very thankful to be able to be here. I'm also really looking forward to getting to know your districts and looking at your projects and your the travel demand and the opportunities that are in your districts that I can only see through your eyes. Although I obviously have been in state government for a long time, I've lived in Georgia and Atlanta since 1993. Only you know your district's needs in the ways that are going to be most important and impactful for your communities, for your counties and your cities, and for today, the future. So, as the times allow and the constraints we might have on various interactions, I will do my absolute very best to schedule time to be with you in your districts and to do as many Teams meetings and add my little pile of Teams meetings to the excellent work that's been done at GDOT here so far. So that concludes my remarks, Commissioner, and thank you very much.
Yeah, Janine, thank you. On behalf of the board, let me welcome you to the GDOT team. And I think you already know this, but this is very much a team, and we're very proud of that reputation. And you'll see every man and woman throughout this department, every district in GDOT is very much a team effort, and we believe in that motto and that ethic of work. But welcome aboard from the board. Any members of the board have anything they want to say to Janine? Or I know she's new and got to get her feet up under her. With that, thank you, Janine, for being here today, and congratulations. We look forward to working with you.
I'm looking forward to being part of It's one of the best DOTs in the country, hands down. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Rudy and I were talking on the way up. I picked a heck of a time to be chairman of the board during a pandemic, but he said at least one thing, you won't ever forget it. And so you won't ever forget the time you came on board during a pandemic. But welcome aboard again. With that, we're going to move along. Josh Waller, you up next for a report, if you will, on the legislature. Oh, yeah. And then for Josh, let me interrupt for just a second. We're still getting a little bit of interference from the telephone. For those calling in, if you will, remember to put your phone on mute, if you will. That would help very much. Thank you. Josh, go ahead.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you an update today, and I want to echo the comments of the Commissioner and the board in welcoming Janine and congratulating her on her new role and look forward to working together moving forward. So let's jump into discussion of session, and probably the best way to kick it off is with a look at the calendar as session unfolded. You know, the red days are the session days, the legislative days, 40 of them, and you can see where they dropped off there. At crossover day was March the 12th, and then sort of the world changed a little bit. It's a tale of two sessions, if you will. Before that date, before the 13th, and I know Angela's going to get into a discussion of the budget, but the overall state budget had about $28.1 billion in state funds. When the budget wrapped up on the 26th of June, it was $25.9 billion. So certainly we've all seen in the news and participated in that process, and so we know that we face some challenges. But I think one of the things to underscore about this session is despite all these challenges, there are a lot of silver linings. There's a lot of things to be excited about. I know Angela will talk about on the budget end. As we look at legislation, there were a lot of legislative successes that we should be happy about and will put us in a stronger position moving forward. So as you can see there, I highlighted March the 16th. That was the special session day that they called to affirm the governor's declaration of the statewide health emergency. So next, I'll just jump right into legislation, House Bill 1098. And every bill I'm going to cover, let me add this caveat. It's all on the governor's desk, but as of yet, the governor has not signed any of these bills. We're not anticipating any problems or any concerns, but we'll continue to keep you updated. But as of right now, none of these have been signed into law. So 1098 was the transportation. Housekeeping, I had the plus to it, Housekeeping Plus, because as sometimes bills do at the Capitol, they pick up a few hitchhikers along the way. Luckily, I think all of these hitchhikers were good. Nobody had a knife on them or anything like that. So the first piece was extending the sunset from 2022 to 2025 for CPI. Remember, House Bill 170 put two indexes on the state motor fuel, one for CPI and one for vehicle efficiency. Vehicle efficiency was indefinite. CPI was sunsetted. This extends that to 2025. The next item basically lets gives planning the flexibility, the planning director the flexibility to develop and update the SSTP, which is the state required strategic transportation plan, with the federally required one. So that allows for harmonizing the documents into really one document, one process, and allowing for greater efficiency and savings. It included a provision clarifying that state funds can be used for the acquisition of right-of-way, and it expands protection for private property owners. It builds on some language that was put into law a few years ago that said that if a billboard is relocated due to condemnation, or if a billboard is taken through condemnation and it can't be relocated due to local ordinance, that they're either grandfathered in or the local government's responsible for those costs. This expands upon that to say that if the billboard's blocked by a sound wall, or when it comes to our projects, if we aren't taking a full property, but we're affecting some aspect of the property, parking, et cetera, and they can't replace that due to zoning, they will likewise either be grandfathered in or the local government would have to cover those costs. The final provision deals with requiring the department to do a bid protest procedure through rule and clarifies that GDOT's included in the state administrative hearings process. Next bill is House Bill 105, and it replaces the state tax on for-hire ground transport trips with a 50-cent per trip excise tax. The revenues are dedicated to transit. So this is a component of what had been in the original version of House Bill 511. House Bill 511, as we'll see, was pared down significantly. This revenue provision will just provide some guaranteed revenue for transit. The revenues must be appropriated to a transit provider for transit projects or the fees phased out, similar to the House Bill 170 fees. Additionally, it clarifies that up to 10% of the revenue collected from the hotel motel excise tax may be used for transit, and the remaining funds have to be on roads and bridges. Next is House Bill 511, the ATL Authority Housekeeping Plus. So like I said, 511 had been pared down. This basically just did some cleanup around the board elections, mirrored a lot of the requirements that are similar to the GDOT board elections at the Capitol. It also made a change attaching the ATL administratively to GDOT instead of DCA. This will not affect day-to-day operations of the ATL, but what it'll mean is when you look at the budget, you'll see instead of a payments to ATL under the Department of Community Affairs, it'll now be under GDOT. So similar to payments to CERTA, you'll have a payments to ATL. Separately, when the ATL was created as part of House Bill 930, it envisioned and ultimately required all of Greta's operations of transit to move to the ATL. That became effective July of this year. And so really by having the ATL attached to GDOT, you really have a unification under one budget item of all the transportation agencies. Greta's still attached to DCA, but their functions are now dealing with the Governor's Development Council, which approves the DRI's developments of regional impact, and they're currently the designated approver by the governor for the ATL, the ARC's TIP. This legislation also, sort of belt and suspenders here, has the CPI index adjustment staying in place through 2025. So next is House Bill 820 and Senate Bill 371. This was a follow-on. This was a recommendation out of the first iteration of the Freight and Logistics Commission. It basically creates a placeholder program within intermodal for Georgia freight, for freight railroads. There's some distinctions between the two bills, dealing with this next line, eligible projects. In one version of the bill, it's sub-programs, and the other, it just says here are project types. So rail enhancement provides for railways and roadway equipment, and railroad equipment, rail preservation projects for short line railways, and then rail industrial projects for industrial access to railroad tracks and facilities. Again, this would all be subject to appropriations, but it creates a placeholder in the budget so that as funding's identified and as we have the next round of recommendations from the Freight Commission, they have a place to start within the budget.
I have a question from Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, does this bill in any way provide for the possibility of passenger rail?
So it doesn't provide any funding, but it structures within intermodal. Theoretically, they could fund it through this. This is really just creating a framework structure to say one day when we have funds available, we envision the department having a program utilizing these funds that would kind of fit in these categories theoretically. I think this is really more for freight, but again, if they made funds available, could be appropriated to intermodal. Similarly, House Resolution 935 is just an extension of the Georgia Commission on Freight and Logistics. So we had the first iteration this last year, and then it continues through the end of this year. And I'll just read kind of what it envisions for this next one. It provides that further study is needed to consider unique and specific solutions for trucking, rail, and air cargo, including reducing the driving risk for truck drivers and other motorists, expanding dedicated lanes for moving freight, and reducing traffic impacts in and out of the ports and around key metropolitan areas. So when the commission did their report, within the last meetings, the commissioner gave a pretty extensive presentation on sort of the universe of needs. And so the expectation is on top of this provision here that they're going to look at some ways to actually start addressing some of those needs. It keeps the membership, the commission membership structure the same. Everyone would probably still be reappointed, but in terms of the numbers and where they're coming from, same composition. So the expectation is they're going to try and keep it as close to the same membership as the first iteration of it. And then they shall submit a report and shall stand abolished on December 31st, 2020. So next is HR 1300, which started off as a department resolution to tackle 2 easements that we needed, converting 2 heritage preserve areas such that we could get the easements to widen a bridge into a roundabout. But it actually became a vehicle for honoring the life and legacy of the late Senator Jack Hill. So on top of that, it renames the Gordonia Altamaha, I got it, State Park as the Jack Hill State Park. So it was very great that we were able to play a small role in having the legislation to help carry that through, obviously, with his untimely passing there in that interim of those 2 sessions. Next, I'm going to go through, and I'm not going to mention each of these, but on the first slide here, you can see the road dedications, House Resolution 1163 and SR 844.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ann, go ahead.
Ann Purcell. I just want to say thank you to our legislative body. There's a wonderful recognition, memory of individuals, as well as outstanding service that individuals have given throughout the state of Georgia for our road dedications. But there's one that I just wanted to say a many thank you for, and also to our board, because a lot of you had your hands on this bill, and that was the one in Bryan County for Blondine Newman Highway. Miss Blondine is over 90 years old. She has been very active within our Bryan County, particularly the northern region of Bryan County. She has served as our tax commissioner. She has even come back to serve as our county commissioner, and she has put in probably a little less than 50 years of public service into our community. And she is proceeding to have a birthday soon, and this will be a wonderful birthday present to her because she is unaware that this is being done in her honor. So thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Josh, go ahead.
All right. And then everyone should have a hard copy, but if not, we'll follow up. I know the district teams, again, this legislation has not been signed yet. Once the governor signs it, then we'll provide for proceeding from that. But the districts and communications are working together on a strategy for, we've always worked, obviously, to produce the signs and working with legislators on their, on how they decide to hold the ceremony. So they're working through a process, as I understand it, to have this proceed in the most socially distanced way possible. So that's something that might be slightly different than previous years, but obviously board members, districts, commissioner, deputy commissioner, all of us will all work together to make it happen. So there are no questions on the state side. I'll proceed just to a quick up.
Go ahead. I have a question from Jeff Lewis.
On the state side, the study committee that you referenced, yeah, I think that's it. Has committee members been appointed to that study committee at this yet?
Not yet, but
when they do, could you provide a list of committee members, please?
Will do.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
So next, another good way is we jump in here on the slide titled 2020 Congressional Calendar and Action Items. Just orient you on that calendar. You can see the days highlighted in a darkish bluish color. Those are the days that the House, U.S. House is in session. Outlined in red are the days that the Senate's projecting that they're going to be in session. So you can see, and I wanted to have this to sort of juxtapose this with the column on the right, which are the items that still remain to be done. So we're here at the 16th. You got the House and Senate coming back in next week. And so the top of the list there is additional stimulus, or sort of COVID phase 4 stimulus. Well, the House has passed a version about a $3 trillion bill that's been sent over to the Senate. The Senate hasn't been inclined just to adopt that wholesale. And there had been some question as to what the Senate would be willing to move in terms of additional stimulus. Majority Leader McConnell has indicated that sometime this week or next, or sometime next week, they would unveil a Senate version. You know, the prognosticators put that a compromise is probably somewhere between $1 billion or $1 trillion. I don't know if I've been saying trillion or billion, but $1 trillion. The HEROES was $3 trillion. The Senate and the likely compromise is going to be probably somewhere between $1 trillion and $2 trillion. By way of reference, AASHTO, when this process began, had signed and asked for about $50 billion to state DOTs to fill in some of the shortfall. The HEROES Act included about $15 billion. So that's one of the key things we're going to see is, will there be in the compromise some additional funds to shore up this statewide revenue loss that states have been seeing. So that's probably consuming the next few weeks, which then you come into September, they're going to do the traditional August work period, district work period or recess. And moving down the list, we're talking about FAST Act reauthorization, which we know that the current authorization bill expires on September the 30th, at the same time that the fiscal year appropriations will expire. And so there's not a whole lot of time on the calendar for them to reconcile. One, you have the INVEST Act, which recently passed the U.S. House at the start of the month, that provided for a significant increase in transportation funding over the 5-year window. Didn't identify the source to shore up the Highway Trust Fund to cover those costs. But in conjunction with increasing the funds, it also created a lot more programs and sort of subdivided those monies. The Senate has its version, the ATIA. It's not passed out the Senate, so just them reconciling the two, it's hard to see before the 30th. So likely a continuing resolution of some or an extension of the current FAST Act is probably the most likely scenario, as well as probably some type of a continuing resolution on appropriations. Even though the House has moved its out of committee, the CHUD, Transportation and HUD appropriations this week. So, but we'll see again whether they're, with the weeks you can see there on the calendar, what they can actually achieve before September 30th. And then the last item there, which I'm going to, on the next slide, is the Highway Trust Fund, which is going to be a critical, it's going to be a critical issue for them to need to tackle. You can see on this graph here, this was produced by Federal Highway as of May the 22nd. So this is the trust fund, the Highway Trust Fund balances, the projected balances. Prior to the COVID-19 impact, there had been consensus that the Highway Trust Fund should be sufficiently capitalized through the end of, or through at least the end of the fiscal year next year, so September of next year, which would have made an extension of the FAST Act fairly straightforward and easy. If you look on this chart, if you look on this graph, you can see there's all the different lines. And so rather than like parsing them, it's just basically differences in terms of when we get back to normal motor fuel collections. But the bottom line is, of all the three, as you can see that based off these projections, they hit the $4 billion mark in the end of this year. That red line, that $4 billion line, is what, for Federal Highway, they say that once the trust fund gets to this point, they have to look at slowing down draws on the Highway Trust Fund. And the last time that we got close to the $4 billion mark, they talked about instead of an 80% reimbursement rate, doing 70%, so throttling down what they'd reimburse. So that's a critical point that we need to avoid. So whether they tackle it between now and September 30th, if they don't, this will be an issue that will be coming back up to everyone between now and the end of the year. And with that,
any questions? Josh, very good update. Josh, we thank you for your work during this difficult, unusual session that I know all the members will never forget. But thank you for keeping us updated, and great job you did this session. Thank you.
Appreciate everyone on the board and Commissioner and everybody. This was a team effort at the Capitol, and so I think we, all things notwithstanding, a lot of silver linings here. So,
yeah, job well done by everybody. Thank you.
So under the Constitution, he has 40 days from sine die, and if he doesn't sign or veto a bill within those 40 days, it becomes law without a signature. That date is August the 4th, or August the 5th. So get through August the 5th. So we'd anticipate they're signed before then. I know that they're going through a lot of bills, and there's a bill review process, having lived that life once. But again, in communications we've had, I think we feel pretty good about all the things that we've been tracking.
All right, Josh, thank you. If you will, Angela's going to come up and present information on the budget. And again, I remind everybody at home, mute your phone for the members calling in. We still hear a little bit of static.
All right, good
And
morning.
Angela, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner. I'm here to present the final FY21 budget. So as Josh kind of mentioned, so after the party left and everybody went home, this is kind of how it all laid out. As you'll see in here, originally we were asked to take a 14% reduction. We ended up only having to take a little bit over a 13% reduction. The big changes you'll see here is probably like I've mentioned in the last several months when I've gone over this, is the capital program. However, we had a much larger bond package that helped compensate for that, and some changes to the fee component. As you can see from here, the original base was $2.1 billion. It was reduced to 1.8 with a $279 million reduction. This next slide kind of lays out how the reductions took place. In the GO bond debt service, typically we would use the fee component to pay for the debt service. Since the fees were cut almost in half down to the 90, reduced almost in half, motor fuel now has gone back to paying for the debt service, and the fees are now used to help supplement part of the State Road and Tollway Authority's budget and all of intermodal. Those funds are used for that. The capital construction cut of $95 million, that consists primarily of 6 projects. There are 3 large state-funded right-of-way projects, so we're going to be split funding those in years, several years. And then we're deferring 3 construction projects until the next fiscal year. These projects are really slated to be let later on, probably like April, May timeframe for 21. We'll just be deferring those to 22. Only a slippage of maybe 2 to 3 months. In the capital construction admin, data collections, departmental admin, planning, and traffic management, all these reductions are what you've heard previously, reducing equipment, travel, training, consulting contracts. Those are all the reductions that were the standard reductions y'all have heard previously. The LMIG adjustment is the 10%, adjusting it to 10% of excise. So with a reduction in the excise amount, the LMIG was reduced to offset that for the 10%. So that's what that reduction is there. In routine maintenance, what you see in routine maintenance, the $48.1 million reduction is, like I stated last month, we're reducing the litter pickup from 6 cycles down to 3. We're reducing statewide striping. We will eliminate 1 herbicide cycle. We're reducing the maintenance engineering inspection through all 7 districts. We'll reduce the ITB budgets, and we'll be reducing equipment and travel like we have in the other programs. In the payments to CERTA category here, the reduction in the $32.3 million, really what this is just to balance the fund source balance between motor fuel and the fee component, which you'll see on this next slide, in order to make sure that we've met all the required level obligations for their debt service operations at GTIP. All right, on this next slide, as you can see, shows the GO bond debt service being removed, being paid with fees. In intermodal, there was an increase of $2 million. This consisted of 4 airport projects that were slated, an adjustment to the HRA merit system assessment, which is typical, and also the $50,000 that I highlighted last month for some right-of-way cleanup where on the Vidalia Hester line trees had grown up in the rail line. That was all included in that. And then you see the $17.8 million increase in the fee component to payments to CERTA. The big changes here in the bond package, and I will highlight that Matt Klein, I'm going to go highlight these bonds for you guys. Matt Klein will be coming up later on in the presentation to kind of present the bond resolutions for y'all's approval, because these bonds are slated to be sold in August. So the $115 million that you see for roads and bridges, $50 million of that is dedicated and carved out for the bridge program, which gives us the ability to replace somewhere between 12 to 16 bridges. And then the remaining $65 million will be used for the capital program. And Meg and her team right now are going through looking to identify what projects will be utilized for that. Also, there was $37 million, as you see here, appropriated for 6 rail lines. 15.4 million was allocated to the Heart of Georgia. 6.3 million was allocated to Cater Parrott, and then 4.3 million was dedicated to Chattooga, Chickamauga. 1.25 million was dedicated to the Georgia Northeastern Rail Line. 7 million was dedicated to Georgia Southwestern, and then finally 2.8 million was dedicated to Ogeechee. So Matt will be bringing those bonds, like I said, up for your approval here shortly. And then finally, as you can see here, I wanted to kind of highlight, as the commissioner said, this is what collections look like trending through the last year. You can see in the last, since the pandemic, you can see like between the March, April, that was that adjustment, the 80 million that we saw adjustment kind of gave that little tick mark there. And then you can see as we started coming back up, as the commissioner highlighted in his report, that we received in the month of June to date. Now, this is not the final audited collections numbers. This has not had the adjustments in it or the interest. We collected a little bit over $2 billion, $2.04 billion. Of that, like he stated, 1.8 million is excise, and then there's roughly 160 million in fees. I will highlight for the month of 20 compared to last year, 19, for the same time frame. So for the entire year compared to last year's numbers for 19, motor fuel collections, the motor fuel taxes and excise was up 1.9% compared to last year. However, the highway impact fees, they're down 3.7%, and then the hotel motel fees are down 15.3%, which is expected from what we saw. Yeah. This concludes my presentation. If y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain those. Yes, Mr. Lewis.
Go ahead. If you could go back to, I think, the first slide where you showed that one. Yeah.
This one?
No, the one. Yeah, that one. In the hopes that when the legislature gets around to the amended budget process in early 21, and in the hopes that revenue has improved, which of these categories do you think would be the most critical that would put any new money back into?
Well, definitely, Lee, and the commissioner will probably say the capital programs, capital construction, capital maintenance. Those will be the programs that we'll look at revisiting, to include those additional dollars in.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from members on the phone or in person here? Angela, thank you. Good job. Difficult times, obviously, from the pandemic and the impact on the budget. Thank you for the work you're doing.
I want to thank my staff, George Christensen and his group. They've worked really hard during this session, trying to keep up with everything and the fast changing. So I want to give them a shout out as well, and appreciate it. Thank you.
No doubt. Budget's like a roller coaster, even in normal times, but worse in difficult times.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Trying to move this along. I apologize for the length of the meeting. Matthew, if you will come on. We obviously are combining, as we've been doing in the past, the committee meetings on Wednesday into the board meeting on Thursday due to the pandemic. Matthew Fowler, Planning and Tolling and Finance Program Manager, is going to be speaking about the MMIP program. Go ahead, Matthew.
Good morning, board members. I was going to give an update. The commissioner spoke earlier on the I-85 widening, which was the first MMIP project out of the gate, and I'll be focusing on 3 of the projects that we have out of the 18 total. This slide here focuses on all 18. The only thing you need to take away from this is there is a lot of activity going on right now, all 18, between pre-construction and construction activities. But we're going to focus on just 3 projects with this. And first up is the I-75 Commercial Vehicle Lane Project, which the President spoke on a little bit yesterday too. And as a refresher, it adds 2 northbound only toll-free commercial vehicle lanes along I-75 from the 475-75 split on the north side of Macon up to around the McDonough area. The lanes will be barrier separated from the general purpose lanes, So picture sort of the 75 South express lanes, those are in the middle. Most locations, these will be on the east side, the outside of the lanes, existing lanes. Got 27 new bridges, replacements, or widenings. And Henry County right now is exploring a potential new interchange on I-75 along Bethlehem Road, existing interpass with no ramps, right south of State Route 155. And we're going to make provisions so that we could tie into that if that interchange proceeds in the future as needed. Key dates we got there is construction starting in 2024 with substantial completion in 2028. Current activities, we've been underway for the past couple years with our engineering consultants. They've been working around the clock on it practically. Got our practical alternatives report, which is underway. That's analyzing impacts and protecting wetlands. Assessment of effects, that's potential impacts to, of course, wetlands as well, natural environment, and historic resources. The pre-notice of intent activities, that is the beginning of starting the simplified environmental process that the Commissioner mentioned earlier with the environmental impact statement and that the President mentioned also yesterday. And that's just a less bureaucratic process. We'll have that environmental document up in about 2 years. We've been doing a lot of survey work down there and just recently finished that up. And traffic reports also been finished up. That means we now have traffic forecasts for the year 2028, which is when the lanes would open, and the year 2048, 20 years beyond. So we'll understand traffic flows at those points. And then we've also got a lot of stakeholder engagement, which actually just beginning this week. This next slide is going to talk about that. Sent out emails to the 4 board members in this area earlier this week, letting you know that we've started our virtual stakeholder outreach. Well, letters have gone out in 3 waves. The last wave went to the general public and other stakeholders, I believe, yesterday evening or this morning. And in the letter, there's a general summary. There's a link to a YouTube video where I give a presentation for 20 minutes on the project. There's a link to the website, and there's contact information. If anybody wants any follow-up questions answered, we'd be glad to get with them. And we're also looking at holding a public information open house later this year, probably in the November timeframe, and that would be done virtually online. Next up is the State Route 400 Express Lane project. It has express lanes from the North Springs MARTA station, 2 in each direction on up to McGinnis Ferry, and then 1 lane in each direction north of McGinnis Ferry up to McFarland. Construction on this one scheduled start in 2022 and wrapping up in 2026. A lot of great activities happen on that one, especially the construction starting in 22. This one's got a public hearing open house scheduled for later this summer, and this will be the first virtual public hearing open house we'll do in the state, and the lessons we learn from that will be applied to all the other projects as well. We're working closely with the folks down in the Environmental Services Office and also FHWA on it too. Looking at a interchange at Tradewinds Parkway, an access point between the express lanes and there. That's a more recent development. Got some early acquisition going on right now. We've got 50+ parcels in progress, 35 of which we've already acquired. And we've got a second round of early acquisitions coming up for another 50 parcels. A lot of coordination going on with various governments in the area, local governments, determine how the bridges will look. I think we're going to tweak the interchange there at 400 and Holcomb Bridge. Agreement with Roswell on that. Agreements and development with State Road and Tollway Authority, and also thinking through how the tolling will work on the lane. And then a lot of good coordination going on with MARTA. There's $100 million in bonds set aside for bus rapid transit up in that corridor, and lots of coordination between our project and their project as well. And the draft environmental assessment has been submitted to FHWA. We're expecting to get that approved really shortly and having our public hearing open house. This is the procurement schedule. So right now, there is a cone of silence, a restriction on communication, because we are in an active procurement with the 400 express lanes. That started with the procurement with the notice of intent back in October, and we've recently shortlisted the finalists, and this will conclude in late 2021, early calendar year 2022. And the shortlisted teams, we got it down to 3. These are the ones that will move forward with preparing a response to our request for proposals, and that's Metro Atlanta Express Solutions, MW400 Partners, and Northlink Partners. Last project I'll touch on here is the I-285 and 20 East interchange. This is one over in DeKalb County. Focused on a lot of good improvements over there. If you recall, back probably 5 or 6 years ago, we opened up an eastbound collector distributor lane around the interchange between 285 and Wesley Chapel, and then a lane on down to Panola. We're basically doing the mirror image of that in the westbound direction, and then adding some other lanes and widening ramps and replacing ramps with more direct flyovers in that area. We've got our public information, well, we finished our public information open houses back in November of last year, and we've got public hearing open houses coming up later this summer. Construction schedule start in 2022 and substantial completion in 25. Current activities, I mentioned we're planning our public hearing open house. Got some early right-of-way acquisition going on. We've got 40 properties in various stages of early acquisition, with 13 more to proceed soon. Also developing light agreements with City of Stonecrest and DeKalb out that way. Recently got our noise assessment and air reports approved by FHWA. That's part of the overall environmental document, one of the good hurdles you want to clear. Our draft environmental assessment's been submitted to FHWA. We're finalizing our costing plans right now, and we've had a really robust stakeholder engagement process throughout the whole thing. Met with a lot of local governments, Chamber of Commerce's, neighborhood associations out in the area, plus others. Here's the procurement schedule on this one. Again, this one's also an active procurement. So there's a restriction on communications. We did the notice of intent to advertise in April of this year, had an industry forum, which is where we invite industry types to come in and ask questions and see our presentation and follow up with one-on-one meetings. This is the first time we did the virtual online version of that instead of having it here or next door at the hotel in their conference center. Have issued the RFQ on July 1st, so that's a big milestone that we've got to, and looking to issue the notice to proceed in the early part of calendar year 2022. Okay, I guess this is Matt, unless there are any questions.
Any questions before we go to you, Matt? Any questions, member of the board? Kevin?
Thank you. The reference on the 400 express lane to Tradewinds Parkway at this point, that's the West Plus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's between Windward and Old Milton, West Plus.
Still coming in, so they can't talk to you on the phone.
I believe the phones have been muted from here, so if you're calling in, I don't believe we can get you questions. But with that, any other questions from those present? Matthew, I'll just say thank you for the MMIP program. It's exciting. Probably a few hours from now, I'll be driving through one of them called I-75, I-16. That's exciting as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff going on with it.
And no doubt. I veer off quite often just to go through and look at it. And it's really making a lot of progress as we get back to the halfway point soon. So thank you for that as well. Exciting projects all over the state. It's a game changer. Next 5 to 10 years is exciting. But with that, before I jump too far ahead, we want to approve some bonds. Matt, if you'd come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner. I'm here to present the board resolution that goes along with the bonds that Angela had just talked about. Again, this is about 37, it's actually 2 separate bonds, but the first one is about $37 million toward rail projects. The other one, again, was the $115 million toward roads and bridges. Bonds are planned to be sold around the 18th or 19th of August, so actually next month, and then the funds will be available on the 27th. One of the reasons we're here today is the next board meeting does not occur until after that, so we wanted to go ahead and get that approved today. So that being said, I would ask for a favorable approval of the resolution to approve a sale of those two bonds.
Do I have a motion for approval? I have a motion from Jeff, second from Robert. I think the phones have been unmuted at home because I saw Kristen went back in there to tell them to do that. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise. I heard a phone, so anyway, the motion has passed. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, for getting that where they could vote.
Yeah, if they can hit *7, it'll unmute, and we can do it back.
Well, maybe we need to do it again, and make sure that we have a quorum. So, if you will hit *7, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
*7.
*7, and you will be unmuted. So again, we have yeah, there you go. I hear somebody. So, we have I guess, Jeff, if you will, a motion from Jeff, second from Robert Brown. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Good deal. I heard it. So we do have a vote. So good. A quorum and a vote has been approved. The motion passes. Thank you, very much, Matt, for that. We go into, as I'm trying to apologize for being late, we're a little bit over time, but, good information, good program today. Under new business, anybody have new business they'd like to discuss? If I hear none, I will just say thank you for everybody that called in. Thank you for the executive team. Thank you for every man and woman in GDOT. Very proud of what you're doing under these unusual circumstances. Thank you for your work. Janine, welcome aboard. And with that, we stand adjourned until next month.